legend of Resurrection Mary has inspired books, movies, songs, and the retelling of a story that dates back to the 1930s. According to an article in the Chicago Tribune, Mary is a pretty Polish girl, about 18, with long blonde hair, wearing a white dancing dress. Countless reports continued to grow over the decades of people picking Mary up hitchhiking only for her to vanish, or a girl in white diving in front of a car, but never to be found. Sightings of Mary continue to this day, and a pub across the street from the cemetery called Chet's Melody Lounge leaves a Bloody Mary on the end of the bar every weekend just in case Mary shows up.
Chicagoans know if you're driving down Archer Avenue at night, somebody might need to scooch.
So I look up, and off to my right, there was a glow. You could tell it was a girl. She had a long cream-colored dress on, and the only thing I really remember, other than her walking so smoothly, she was kind of like floating along the road, and I didn't see a face. There was just like a black. It was just like black there.
Drive half an hour southwest to the Bean and you're going to find Resurrection Catholic Cemetery, the namesake of Illinois' arguably most famous ghost, Resurrection Mary. The story goes that in the 1930s, a woman named Mary was dancing the night away with her beau at the O. Henry Ballroom. We know it as the Willowbrook, but originally it was the O. Henry, and now it's a hot dog joint. Anyway, the O. Henry Ballroom attracted kids all over the tri-state who had big band fever, including Mary and her beau, or former beau. Legend has it they got into a real knockdown drag-out that led to Mary stomping off to Archer to try and find a way home, but she didn't get very far. She was struck in a hit-and-run accident and spent her final moments in the dark on Archer's rough pavement. And now lots of people, mostly men, have claimed to see her ghost. Here's Jerry's story. In 1939, Jerry Pallas swears that he saw Mary in a beautiful white dress at the Liberty Grove and Hall. Finally got the courage to ask her to dance, and they cut a rug all night. He even ignored the major red flag of her icy cold hands, only saying, "Cold hands, warm heart, Jerry." He offered her a ride home, and while she gave him an address, she first asked him to drive up Archer for a little bit. Once they hit Resurrection Cemetery, she told him to pull over, and he obliged. Then she opened the door and said, "I have to go, and you can't follow me." And like that, she was gone. Jerry, God love him, got up the courage to drive to the original address she gave him the next day, where an older woman answered the door with an uncanny likeness to Mary. And when he said he'd like to see her, the woman shook her head. She's been dead for years, and she's buried in Resurrection Cemetery. So now we have this beautiful ghost walking up and down Archer Avenue looking for a ride, and we don't know who she is. The most popular theory is that Mary is actually Anna Norkus, a 13-year-old who died in a car accident in 1927. Anna was an avid dancer, and she begged her father to take her to the O. Henry Ballroom for her 13th birthday. And then after a night of dancing, they never made it home. But despite evidence like this, historians, paranormal experts, armchair detectives, nobody can agree exactly on who Mary is. And that is not the most mysterious thing about her.
On Archer Avenue, just outside of Resurrection Cemetery, a few miles southwest of Chicago, you may run into the spirit of Mary Bregovy, who was killed in a car crash in 1934 while leaving this dance club. She is one of the most documented ghosts in the history of the United States, and she is known simply as Resurrection Mary. Throughout the years, many cab drivers in Chicago have reported seeing a woman in a white gown with blonde hair standing on Archer Avenue, alone. They offer her a ride, and she gets into the cab. And she always tells them to drive straight towards Resurrection Cemetery. And as soon as they approach the cemetery gates, she instructs them to stop, and then she vanishes right before their eyes. Resurrection Mary is often seen at dance clubs around this area and is most frequently spotted at Willowbrook Dance Hall. This is where she once met a young man named Jerry, who was mesmerized by her beauty and spent all night dancing with her. He asked her where she lived and she gave him a address on Damon Avenue. And when he offered to drive her home, she accepted. But instead of taking her home, she told him to take her to Resurrection Cemetery. And she got out of the car, walked towards the gates, and vanished into thin air. The next morning, Jerry went to the address on Damon Avenue. He knocked on the door and asked for Mary, and even saw a picture of the girl he had danced with all night long. To his complete horror, he was told that she had died 5 years ago. And then it clicked. That was why she was so ice cold as a corpse. People who have seen Mary on Archer Avenue say that she glows in the dark, but that her face is void of all features, and that it is just a black hole. So if you're alone at night on Archer Avenue, beware of Resurrection Mary.
Her name is Resurrection Mary, and since the 1930s, she's been making this unassuming avenue one of the most eerie roads in America. Legend has it that one night in the early 1930s, Mary and her boyfriend attended a dance at the O. Henry Ballroom, now known as the Willowbrook. It was an evening of harmless fun until...
They had been dancing, got into an argument, and she left and was walking up Archer Avenue when she was struck and killed by a hit-and-run driver. Her grieving parents buried her in Resurrection Cemetery.
But Mary never got the chance to rest in peace.
In the 1970s, Resurrection Cemetery began moving what were called term graves into different burial spots. Now, the term graves were sort of like rental spots. So they were for bodies to be stored until an actual plot could be purchased.
In the 70s, they had actually moved Mary's grave from where it was to an unmarked grave in another part of Resurrection Cemetery.
And the disturbance of Mary's resting place seemed to have paranormal consequences.
A lot of people, they believe that when they moved her grave, she would leave the cemetery, but then she couldn't find her grave because they had actually moved it.
It makes you wonder if perhaps the disturbance of these graves is really what sort of kicked off this cycle and caused the ghosts to be seen on Archer Avenue.
Soon, reports were coming in of a strange spectral girl wandering Archer Avenue. Resurrection Mary. Some claim her spirit is desperately searching for someone to lead her back to Resurrection Cemetery.
There was a young man, his name was Jerry Palis. He actually met a young woman one night at a dance, a pretty blonde woman. He spent the entire evening with her. They had dinner together, they had drinks together, he danced with her. He even claimed that he kissed her a couple of times. At the end of the evening, he offered her a ride home, which she accepted. Jerry then took her down Archer Avenue, right across the street from Resurrection Cemetery. He offered to drive her the rest of the way home. Instead, she put her hand on his and said, "Where I'm going, you can't follow." Got out of the car, ran across the road directly toward the gates to the cemetery, and disappeared. And it was at that point that Jerry claimed that he realized he'd spent the entire evening with a ghost.
Oh, but one phantom joyride? That isn't enough to make this one of America's creepiest thoroughfares. Pull up a chair at Chet's Melody Lounge. Since the 1960s, they've been serving drinks directly across the street from Resurrection Cemetery. All too convenient for a thirsty ghost.
Many years ago, a cab driver actually came in at 3 o'clock in the morning and asked my father, who was tending bar at the time, where the girl was. He said he picked up a girl, asked to stop here to use the bathroom. My father and the customers that were here had no idea what he was talking about because the door never opened. He said he's seen her come in here, and he thought that she was trying to just stiff him for the cab ride. So he was irate, and my father said, well, no one came in. The customer said no one came in, and the cab driver thought that everyone was just sticking up for this girl. So my father let him look through the place, and he just said, well, there's nobody here. He just shook his head and left.
So next time you're flagged down by a strange young woman on Archer Avenue, take our advice. Keep driving.
I think what really scares people about the story of Resurrection Mary is that you're not even safe in your own car. You could be touched by the supernatural just driving down the road.